My name is Ron Bovard from Bovard Studio Stained Glass.
Okay. And where are we? What do you guys do?
We're in Fairfield, Iowa, and we create new stained glass windows and restore stained glass windows for public buildings throughout the United States.
Cool. How many businesses would you say do the kind of things that you guys do?
Well, there's probably about 2,000 stained glass studios in the United States, but only 5 or 6 that do what we do with the commercial public building sector.
And how long? What's the story? Tell me a little bit about where you guys started.
Okay. Well, I started as an artist in the early 70s. I had my first show in Carnegie Museum in 1972 in Pittsburgh. And then we moved to Iowa in 1985, and I helped start I moved to Iowa in January of 1982 and helped start a company called Creative Glassworks, where we developed abrasive water jet and laser cutting of glass and did a lot of art glass. I sold my stock in that company in 1985 to start Bovard Studio, Inc.
Were you always doing glass?
No, I was a painter. I had about 25 one-man shows, most of them in New York City, some in Europe, as a fine art painter.
And what inspired you when you were painting?
I was always trying to create that perfect icon of humanity, creating a bridge between the spiritual and the celestial and the terrestrial.
So what would you say some of the works that you did for your early stuff looked like?
They were mostly paintings of human beings surrounded by vibrations of consciousness.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Do you do that kind of work now?
No, I've totally devoted myself to the craft of stained glass and running this business, and I've been fortunate to hire a bunch of artists that are more talented than I am.
Stop! I'm sure that's not true. Let's kind of go back for a second and tell me a little bit. What was the transition just for you? Because the focus for this piece is a lot on artistry.
Yes.
And on running an art-focused business.
Sure.
So what do you think, what was that transition for you from doing fine art yourself to just stained glass as a medium?
Okay.
And then we can go from there.
Well, in Pittsburgh, I was painting. I was a painter. I studied art in college, moved to Pittsburgh in 1971, and became very active in the art community, had a number of art shows in the Pittsburgh area. Then I became fairly successful with quite a large number of art exhibits in New York City and some in different countries. In Vienna, Austria, I had a show in England, around the world. But I never made much money selling fine art. And with stained glass, you get a down payment, a contract, a deposit, and you make the project after it's sold. And as a parent of 5 children, that was quite appealing to me. So when I moved to Fairfield, Iowa, to help start a company called Creative Glassworks, I got introduced more seriously to the art of stained glass. Before that, I had dabbled in stained glass as an art form in Pittsburgh. But when I moved to Iowa, I really devoted myself more and more to stained glass as a business and developed it into a business. And I was fortunate enough to move to a small town that had about 200 artists in it at that time, in a town of 10,000 people. There were about 20 of us showing in New York City at the time that I moved here. So it was quite an active arts community. In fact, the Smithsonian Magazine just this past month named Fairfield, Iowa as one of the 10 most interesting small towns in America.
How is designing and creating glass different creatively than putting something on paper or on canvas?
Well, first of all, stained glass, at least for the public building sector, becomes part of the architecture of the building. So you have structural engineering that has to go into the construction of the stained glass as well as the art form. So it has to be art and structure because it has to stand the test of time. A typical stained glass window lasts for centuries, and it has to understand wind load. I mean, we have glazing systems that we've developed that are accredited and approved by the state of Florida for the maximum hurricane codes in the United States, up to 150 miles an hour with impact codes, where the testing of our exterior glazing system is actually tested by shooting a 2x4 out of a cannon. We've also been approved for earthquake codes and developed techniques and technologies for laminating glass onto half-inch thick, quarter-inch tempered laminated glass. The West Angeles Cathedral in Los Angeles would be a sample of that, where we have a stained glass window that's the height of a 10-story building and wider than 2 football fields installed in that church.
You started this glass, you were part of this glass artworks company. And then how from there did you begin to start your own business?
Well, I started by opening up a studio and an art center in Fairfield, Iowa, that was like an art community with 20 or 30 studios in this old factory that we had here. And I was doing local work, but it became very apparent very soon that the market of Fairfield, Iowa was not big enough. So I started doing a few churches. I did one in Branson Hills, Missouri, an Assembly of God church, a large faceted glass window that's dull de verre cast in an epoxy resin, a very artistic type of form. And then I got a restoration project and a fire in a church in Hamilton, Illinois, just across the river from Iowa, and we had to recreate a lot of the lost glass and use a lot of the glass from their church. Originally, when that First Methodist Church of Hamilton, Illinois burned, very historically, it had been through like 3 or 4 fires, and they had newspaper clippings of 100 years ago of the patrons pulling the windows out of the burning church with lead dripping down their arms. And then when it burned again about 25 years ago in the early stages of my business, we were hired to restore those windows and recreate the lost windows for their new church that they built after their most recent fire.
How did you get the very first church that you did? How did you get them to trust you?
Faith. And also chutzpah. You know, I always had a very strong self-confidence. You know, as a child, I'd lived in 13 different cities by the time I was in 8th grade, from San Francisco to Worcester, Massachusetts. And so I was always the new kid. And in 8th grade, I became an athlete, a gymnast. And I was a gymnast all the way from 8th grade through college. And I was actually very good. I was one of the top gymnasts in the national level and competed in national championships. And so I was used to performing in front of crowds. And, you know, I've never been shy. And therefore, I have confidence. And when you tell the truth and you speak from the heart, people believe you and trust you, as they should.
Did you think you could do it, though?
I knew I could. I had no hesitation whatsoever. In fact, those faceted glass panels weighed about 400 or 500 pounds apiece, each section of that window, and I was using my child's skateboard, my son Greg's skateboard, to scooch them around the studio from one table to another, because I didn't have a forklift at that time when I was starting out.
Where were you working out of?
It was right over here at the Loudon building, right across town, which is an old factory that was converted to art studios. Now it's condominiums for young people. In fact, my daughter lived there for a few years.
So you started in this small studio space, and then how did you grow from there? You saw that there was a lot of business around, and then what?
Well, I come from a family of small businessmen. My parents had a small business. My uncles and aunts all had small businesses. My wife's family comes from small businesses. Her parents, her aunts and uncles all had small businesses. So I grew up with the ups and downs of small business. And that really helped. But I also understood that Fairfield was, in this region of the Midwest where I wanted to live and raise my children, did not have enough of a market. So what I did was I thought, who sells product to my customers? And it occurred to me that pew salesmen that sell pews to churches, which are called benches in courthouses, which also have stained glass, sell the product to those customers. So what I did was I did a direct mail campaign and contacted every pew salesman in the United States, or bench salesman to courthouses in the United States, and recruited a number of them to bring in and train them to add stained glass to their mixed bag. So I have independent sales reps from all over the United States selling our product on a straight commission basis. They're not employees, they're independent manufacturers' representatives that sell related products to the same customers that I sell stained glass to. Now, this works very well because as a pew salesman, when they're also selling stained glass, the leads that I send them, those customers are also qualified to buy their other products, pew restoration or new pews or new courtroom benches. So they sell more pews and benches because they sell stained glass. And because they sell pews and benches, which are the same customers for stained glass, both new and restoration, they sell more stained glass because they sell pews.
At what point did you start hiring other artists and bringing in other kind of craftsmen into your team to grow the business?
When I first started selling church windows, okay, then I realized I needed help. Actually, at the very beginning of my business, I started out actually in the production business a little bit more earlier than I started in the church business. One of the sales reps for a company that I had worked for contacted me and wanted me to develop a line of windows for the home supply trade. So I developed a line of octagon window inserts that was sold through the lumberyard chains such as Payless Cashways and Sutherland Lumber. Root and Klein was the window manufacturer. I ended up with the Lowe's lumberyard, home improvement account, and I developed some new products for them, including the first brass cane windows which you see all the time in all the lumberyards all over the world these days, was first developed by me for Marvin Door, okay? And then it always bothered me that the brass came tarnished, and we would use lacquer pens to paint the solder joints the brass color. So I used the Foster Sunglass Factory, the company that gold-plated them in Nogales, New Mexico, to gold plate the windows for Lowe's Corporation. So for $6 for an octagon insert, I gold plated them so they wouldn't tarnish. And then suddenly, 6 months later, everyone in the industry was selling gold-plated windows once it hit the national door shows. And in the commodities line, if someone comes in 10 cents cheaper, and all the big boys suddenly were copying my products with the brass cane and the gold-plated lead came, so I saw there was no future in that market. So what I did was I gave them my copyrights for my designs, told them of a couple of large manufacturers to go get them made from, and stopped producing that, and developed myself into the specialty church and courthouse and stained glass market that's more unique and less of a production type thing. So I was only in that production business for 2 or 3 years before I got into the church business.
What part of what you do every day makes you the happiest?
Creating jobs for other artists and keeping a lot of craftspeople employed. Plus, I love dealing with my customers. They're really beautiful people with golden hearts. They're really trying to fulfill their spiritual aspirations and creating an environment for worship. And it's just so beautiful and such an honor to be in this craft and trade.
So you are still doing designs of people with vibrations.
Yeah, I'm more of an art director these days. I look over the artist's shoulders and say, try this or try that. Like I say, I've hired artists that are more classically trained and are better than I am. But I still have an eye for it, and occasionally, for the example, the West Angeles Cathedral is one of my designs in Los Angeles, but that's more contemporary. I was more of a contemporary artist than a traditional artist, and a large part of our trade is the traditional arts of stained glass, and the stained glass heritage we create for the churches. There's nothing that's ever been done in stained glass that we can't do today or match in style or quality that's ever been done before. And we also do some very contemporary windows, which we enjoy. So we do all the different styles, as well as restore the great stained glass heritage is. For example, Louis Tiffany, his windows are up to 6 or 7 layers of glass thick. It's a window on a window on a window on a window, and it creates this magical scene, and we get to restore those and take them apart and rebuild them. So we see all his secrets and how his craft was done and how the other great artists' crafts were done. So we learn by doing restoration on how to create and use all these techniques in our new windows and all their brushstrokes and all the magic that they've created. And so the restoration really gives us a really strong foundation in creating new stained glass heritages for our clients, the churches, courthouses, libraries, and other types of public buildings.
What do you think is maybe the one or two most important lessons that you've learned in managing other people who are creative?
Well, you really have to put your own ego aside. And recognize the talents that others have and acknowledge their talent and their own creativity. Then you get an exchange and an interaction going. And I find that having groups of artists working together creates much finer and much better art than the individual artist working in the closet alone and the isolation where you have this ego. I know when I worked with a bunch of artists and we all had independent studios over the years that we all were like locked in our own closet in our own world, and we thought we were going to be the next Picasso and the whole world was going to rush to our doorstep. And that's not the way it works. But I find by having groups of artists that I've hired over the years working together and sharing their ideas and their creativity, that the artwork that they produce is much finer and more evolved than the work that an individual would create. Your film industry would be an example. It's a group of a large number of people working together to create the art of our times that's probably going to last longer than all the other arts that we're talking about. It's amazing. So through this, I understand how the Renaissance worked and why it was such a bloom, because you didn't have individual artists in the Renaissance working individually. They all worked together in a studio with a group of artists, and you had your leaders and you're the one who became famous, but he was surrounded in a studio setting with 10, 12, or 15 other artists all working together to create these great masterpieces, which propelled society and our culture forward at that time at a very rapid rate. And today with for example, in the software industry, it's large groups of people working together on the computer games and advancing the technology and all the social media networks working together at groups that advance things so much more rapidly than the individual isolated working alone. It's teams and teams of people, including in the fine arts, advance things much more quickly. So I find when I bring in a very talented artist into a group of other artists or glass painters or designers, when they start working together, they advance and grow much more rapidly than they would have if they were working individually.
What's the most challenging moment of your career and how did you overcome it?
Everything is fun. You know, as far as challenges go, I find that the bigger the challenge, the more creative the solution, and the challenges and the obstacles are what advance business the fastest, because you either overcome them or you don't exist anymore. And therefore, it's a great motivation is the individual challenges. For example, we're doing a dome right now, a large dome in an Eastern church, and it's something I haven't seen before. So the radius of the dome is not just in the one direction like we're used to, that's even this way and this way, but it's all irregular, each panel is, and we didn't know that when we bid it. So I'm going to lose tens of thousands of dollars on this project, but we're going to learn a whole lot about something that's unique that we haven't run across before, so we're getting paid for an education. And we will do a great job for them, and they will be happy. They will never know that what we had to overcome to restore this unique dome that has multiple radiuses within each of the panels. It's a fairly large dome, about 30 feet in diameter, and we do a lot of domes and ley lights and skylights across the country.
What makes you productive? What makes you happy?
Well, when I was younger, I had a lot more energy than I do now. And in fact, I was like the Energizer bunny. I would just go, go, go. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I slowed down and I call myself semi-retired. Of course, in the early days of the business, it was 24/7. You just worked. So then eventually I was able to cut down to half time, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then now I have a very relaxed work schedule. I am 65. I am retirement age. but I don't know what I would do with myself if I left the business, so I'm much more relaxed about my schedule. I've trained people, replaced myself in just about every aspect of the job, so I do come to work every day, but it's at a much more relaxed pace. And fortunately, over the last 27, 28 years that I've been in this business, I've found very talented people to replace myself in most aspects of the trade. So I'm enjoying life a lot more. But I do come to work every day, but I do find time to play golf and go fishing.
What is your definition of an artisan?
Someone who does things with excellence and has that spark of spirituality in their work, whether it's a carpenter building a house, or whether it's a painter or a software engineer or a photographer or someone who's making movies. It's that connection of the relative terrestrial with the celestial or the absolute. And it's just building that bridge between what we have here on earth in our everyday existence to our spiritual aspirations.
What is success?
Success is meeting payroll and not having to worry about it to that point. And as far as financial success goes, financial success is being able to buy anything you want from Walmart without thinking how much you're spending.
What about creative success?
Creative success is creating a heritage for those around you that really uplifts people and makes the world a more beautiful place and reminds them of something more than stuff.